The idea for this podcast was born out of office chat about different HR scenarios, hypothetical problems, and how each of us would approach them, advise others on them, as well as some nuanced ideas and perspectives. We thought, why not make a podcast? Because everybody else has. The idea is that it will be a sub 10-minute discussion, but I strongly suspect that it will go on for longer than that. We haven't prepared anything more than this, which may be our downfall, but we'll see how it goes. So, welcome to our currently unnamed podcast. Let's begin. If you would like to introduce yourselves.
I'm Tom and I'm one of the co-founders.
Then I'm Terri and I'm the other co-founder.
And I'm Katie and I'm the marketing consultant. What would you like to discuss today?
One thing I've been thinking about more recently is like how companies that are recruiting in multiple locations sort out salaries. And the reason that it's becoming, I guess, more on the radar is changes in legislation, which is always an exciting thing to talk about on a podcast. That means companies are going to have to start in some way or another disclosing salaries when they open jobs within the EU. And that's already been the case in quite a few other places, including some states. So I think it's going to be a problem that I think companies have to tackle now because they're going to need advertising jobs. And we all know Terri loves reward, so it's something she'll have loads of thoughts on.
Yeah. So I think the first question is, how do you set a salary, right? For especially if you are going remote. If you're saying it's a remote role, it can be done from anywhere. What salary are you setting? Because at the end of the day, you need to have a budget, right?
Yeah, and I guess that linked to that is, do you have like a strategy about your salary? Like, are you trying to get the best person, the less cost, or are you trying to fill a role? What's your priority? So I'll give an example of that. So say you had a job and you were opening it in London, but also you're happy to recruit someone in Sofia or Manila. Obviously, the expected salary in those locations are super different. So do you just decide, if we're going to hire, we could hire in London, we'll pay that wherever it is, and it could end up paying tons more and probably have loads of kick-off problems. Or do you then have to think about every single location you might recruit in and salaries those locations, which becomes, I guess, a huge job, right?
There's not just salary, right? It's the on costs as well. So what are your employer contributions in each of those locations? And they are really different, especially between the locations you talked about. And when your finance team is asking you to budget, what number do you put in? Do you put in the average? Do you put in the maximum? Do you put in the minimum?
And in your experience, what is the common approach to that?
Well, I think it's changing, right? Because I think olden days, when we were in-house people, you probably wouldn't go as remote. You'd probably say we want it in one of these 4 countries. And then I think people would tend to have a benchmark for each of those locations. And then you'd work to that. But in terms of now, like, didn't feel it'd be good to have an HR podcast about mentioning pandemic. I think the world has changed a huge amount, and like lots of companies we work with are super open locations. And often now it's kind of more candidate led. So they'll go and open this role, find the best person, and then it does create difficult conversations for recruiters because you'll say to someone, what's your salary expectation? And they'll go, well, what's the role paying? Mm-hmm. And then it's like pass the monkey till someone's prepared to give a number. Or recruitment have kind of like bullshit their way through the call, just saying like normal, it really depends on the person and where we hire them, and there's no information changed. And in those situations, why should the candidate give their salary? Which obviously is what the legislations we refer to has been brought in to do, is to stop companies discriminating against people. And I think there's an underlying gender thing with that, but also a location thing. But how it works, going back to that, is you'll get a group of people, you have a load of like people in country X, people in country Y, and they have different salaries. And then depending on the company, they might prioritize on quality of the person, or they might prioritize on which one they think's best value for money.
In that situation where you're saying it's kind of candidate led, how would that work with this new change in legislation? Would they have to open multiple roles in different countries and potentially the candidates can then compare them?
Yeah, and I think possibly, you're going to potentially do that, which isn't great, I would say, for the market, because you'll then choose certain countries, so people could miss out, right? Like you might not want to go and post a job in the 31 countries you're prepared to advertise in. So you might just say, which are the top 6 or whatever. But I think some of it also comes down to exactly what the legislation says. Like last time we read about it, EU has passed legislation and said this needs to happen, but then it's up to each member state to like actually ratify it into local law. and that could have nuance or discrepancies in it, which might mean you do it differently. Or you can do it for some countries in one way. Like you might be able to say the salary is this in this country, but we'll be changing for like local markets or whatever. I don't know. And I think that's some of the challenges that companies are going to need to walk through.
And do you think companies that have already been quite progressive and transparent about the salaries will notice much of a difference around this?
I think you will, because the whole location thing. Because I can't imagine, and we've not worked with or come across any companies that would pay the same in like a really low cost jurisdiction with a higher cost jurisdiction, because it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense to do that, right? I mean, you could make Terry's thing about the balance sheet a lot easier, because if you always paid X for this role, regardless where you hired it, all those problems goes away. But also you kind of feel like you may well just be burning money you don't need to.
And I think we kind of touched on this when we spoke in the office about what do you do if you've got an employee who says, I want to relocate to a different country. How do you then assess what you pay them? Because is their current salary based on the cost of living of where they are, if they're required to be in the office or if they're fully remote? And how, as a business, do you tackle that?
That's a really interesting point, and experienced it physically, when we've been in-house as well. Because going back to, what Tom was saying, most companies have people in different locations because it's potentially, a lower cost of living, etc. So if someone is choosing to be based in London and they're going to a lower cost jurisdiction, technically, I feel personally that the person should be reflective of the salary of that location, especially if there's already other people in that location. It wouldn't be fair if they were transferring their London salary across to a different location. But it is hard for the individual, because if the person's choosing to do it, that's fine. But if, say, you needed that individual to be in a different location, that brings another of complexity, because actually that person would be taking a salary difference, and you don't know what they may be having to pay their mortgage back in a different location whilst they're trying to rent their house out or something. So it does bring up lots of complexities that I don't really know what the answers are.
And I think that it's almost the opposite way is more hard, isn't it? So say like I'm based in a low cost country and I decide I want to move to UK or US where the costs are going to be a lot higher. Should the company have any responsibility to pay me more? Like, I mean, I guess it's up to the company in those circumstances how much that person's value is.
Or the value of them being in that other location, right? But we've seen happen before, right? So, persons, especially moving to somewhere like the Isle of Man or the United Kingdom, the UK, where it may take a little while for someone's visa to come through or something. So you go and agree a salary, and they're sat somewhere, on that salary for a couple of months, working for you remotely or something, whilst they're waiting to come across. Then they turn around and are like, oh, I don't ever want to come. But you've already set a precedent. It's fine for them sat there. They've been able to show that they can do their job, etc. from that location, and it's all worked fine. So what is the incentive then to make them move?
And then also the cost to the business of replacing them. Is it actually better to honour that salary in that other location to be able to keep that talent? Or do you then look at replacing them at a salary that's reflective of that location?
And a lot of those things will be unknowns, right? Because at that stage, you won't know what is going to cost to replace. And this kind of comes into a whole other conversation about cost replacement, right? And I think it will be massively made more complex by what we're talking about, but it's how you keep your salaries, keep pace with the market, which I don't think, again, companies really struggle to do that. Like you'll often say, like, for argument's sake, we're looking to hire another marketing consultant, and you've been here a bit longer, we might find the market's a lot more than we pay you. And then what do you do? And just think how much more complicated that is when you're prepared to hire anywhere. Like people trying to have transparency of salaries and things.
I think it just it again stems back to this thing is the amount of companies that you speak to that aren't transparent with their salaries. I'm not going to lie, the amount of companies that we speak to that potentially the manager doesn't see the salary, and it's suddenly you've got to let everyone know, and then that causes a big thing, because what happens if everyone's off a pace on the market? What happens if the person is being paid more than the manager? What happens if one person's being paid more than the rest of the team? It just has this big knock-on effect.
So maybe that's a question. Should companies just always be transparent about salaries?
9 out of 10 HR peoples will gasp in no, but then there are companies, even ones we've worked with or been in, parts of companies that we've been in before that have been transparent, but did know that they would have to take that exercise to bring them up to market. But then the question is, well, what is market? Because, you know, again, in a lot of the industries that we're in, there isn't marketing data, benchmarking data for someone who is, you know, a casino specialist or someone who's X role. So it's like, you know, where do you get your benchmarking data from on what the person should be paid? Is it just what the cap is, the ceiling within the team? Yeah, I feel like all we're doing is bringing more issues, but I don't think we're ever going to resolve it.
Yeah, I was wondering how we kind of round it off to conclude on it, but I guess it's one of those that poses more questions than it answers.
And I guess it's something that we need to help our customers get to grips with somehow. Because I don't if there was a super easy answer, you probably wouldn't have had it as a podcast topic.
Well, and I was just going to say that, like, everything that we've discussed, we've ultimately said it depends on the business and the situation. So there is no one rule for all of it. So it's interesting that something as wide spanning as legislation is going to come in, but actually how that impacts every business is going to be so different.
So I guess a big part of that is, it's like, okay, legislation's coming in, but and says that, okay, you have to do this, but it doesn't provide you any guidance on how you make that change, right? There was something we needed to talk about, is whether the company has got an entity set up, but that's really boring. It's like, well, can they have the person in that location? Do you need tax to ensure that they... I know someone said to me, I was having a chat with them, and they are looking to go into a new jurisdiction and they're using an employer of record. And the employer of record, so they've got shift patterns, and the employer of record for this location saying, well, that's not legal, you can't do that. And they're like, well, how's it not legal? There's other companies doing exactly the same shift patterns in that location. Okay, so how are they getting around it? But because the employer of record, they're the employer, they're saying they don't want to do it. But then it's like, well, how does a supermarket work? How does this work? How does that work? So it's you know, you do need some on the ground knowledge to then be able to, because they've got someone who they know, chatted to them, they were able to liaise with the employer of record, and they have been able to do it. So even an employer of record sometimes isn't the easiest thing to get around as a foreign employer.
And they don't take any risk, right? An employer of record shouldn't. They don't want to carry risk for you. Their risk is they're employing the person for you, not that they're skirting around the edges of legislation.
So that will be what is the impact actually on employer record? Because it's them that's the employer. So a lot of our customers wouldn't need to advertise.
Well, yeah, I guess it really depends on the process, right? Because so for most of our clients, they'll advertise the job, take you through the process, and at the end, they'll drop in, oh, by the way, you're going to be for an employer record. So to meet the legislation, if they're advertising the job, they need to put salary on it. And they're
advertising on the salary. Oh, okay, sorry, yeah, it's on the salary. But that is interesting, isn't it? Because the transparency bit is internal as well, right?
And it's the same with like the recruitment process. You're not allowed to ask someone salary history, but obviously it's very specifically says salary history. So like by the letter of the law, you could say, what's your salary expectations? I imagine what will happen is someone at some point will take someone to court over that. And it might need to be in every country, but a judge or whatever will decide that you're asking that with the intention of finding out what someone's salary history is. Because it's not like you can never claim the two things are not linked, right? I can never say to you, Terry, well, okay, you apply for this job, what kind of salary are you looking for? Your brain is never going to think, oh, I've done a lot of market research on this job. Regardless of what I'm on now, I'm going to ask for this different number. Everything will be anchored by your salary history.
Yeah, the likelihood is no one's going to go beneath the salary that they're currently on, right?
And you probably, because of how people will judge their self-worth, you're going to think, oh, maybe I could push an extra 10, 15%. Also not going to say, oh, double what I'm on now.
Then we've got the fun of where it comes in about the whole gender and people who women typically go, well, I'm on 50 grand. So actually, if I go to 51, that's a bit more. And if I come down to 50, I'll be all right. Men typically are, okay, I'm going to go in at 60. So if I get pushed down to 55, I'm still 5K up.
I mean, this is probably the point, or one of the points of the legislation, right? Just iron all those things out, all those discrepancies between how people do this from a different background. There's definitely like going to be other things in your background that make you more or less confident about salary. And it probably is middle class white man who's much more confident and everyone else who's less confident. There's more about getting the job than thinking about actually marginal gains on salary.
And I also think it depends on the candidate's situation. You know, are they currently in a job, employed in a situation where they don't necessarily need the next job? So they're like, well, to encourage me to move, I'd want it to be at least X amount more than what I'm currently on.
Yeah.
Or is that candidate in the position of I'm unemployed and have been for so long now that I financially need an income, and they're more likely to take a lower salary. So I think it gives that even playing field to the candidates to say that transparency of this is what we're offering instead of it depends on who applies.
So where does the transparency come to? We're offering 50 to 60 grand, but the person says, well, I want 70. If you suddenly say, okay, we'll go up to 70, where does the transparency? Do we have to retrospectively?
Well, I guess this is where it's a government organisation passing legislation versus a corporate, right? Because I guess, look, the government wouldn't. They'll have salary bands that they're very stuck to, and they'll almost be assuming that's the same. Because it's a really relevant question. Well, what would happen if I chance my own applied, it says 50 to 60, but rather than having 5 of the 5 skills, I got 3, and the company actually really liked me, are they allowed to offer me below?
So is it just the advertising?
I don't know. Yeah, this is the thing. We probably should do a follow-up and read through whatever legislation's come out most recently. Because when I last read it, it wasn't clear the best way to do it. And a couple of companies were working on with it, but it's more around how you do it, a remote advert, right? How do you do a remote, which is where we started from. The whole thing about people are over or under and how we play in reality. Oh, you're going to be able to sue them. If it said 50 to 60, you get 47 because you've not got the experience.
So is it actually the onus is on the company to do a matrix to say why they're not? I was going to say why they're not going to offer that, but if I'm saying 50 to 60, well, what is it that does the person need to have on 50 and what do they need to have on 60? How do you determine between that range, right?
Yeah.
Or how big is the band allowed to be? Okay, we can offer you anywhere between 30 and 100.
And is that what employers are going to do? Just advertise the very lowest salary to cover themselves?
Yeah.
But you've got to be careful of that, right? Because if you just put it at the low end, you don't want to put off candidates that might be at the high end.
Yeah, you want to make sure you're attracting the right kind of candidates.
So I think companies will definitely start, I would assume, with really big bands. Like they'll do like 60 to 120 or something like that. But then there'll probably be case law created around it, right? Someone will say, well, that's ludicrous. Like that's 100% range. So then I imagine it will be what's reasonable, what would be a reasonable bracket. That's how law tends to work, right? It's not like at 25% they wouldn't say, they say what's reasonable.
And who is the onus on to show that it's reasonable?
Yeah, well, that's like all I remember from my law degree is what the man on the Clapham omnibus would have thought. Remember that?
The what? Sorry.
It was like the man on the Clapham omnibus that said, would he think this was fair or reasonable? So you're trying to imagine a person and what their view of it would be. It's hard to say what's reasonable, right? And that's why I guess law passed to that because it's open to interpretation.
I think that's the biggest thing, though, isn't it? It is open to interpretation. It's the same with sexual harassment. If you're telling a joke, Katie, you might not find it being, discriminative or, stuff, but I could actually think personally I do, and then I could go and sue you on that because it's the interpretation of me. It doesn't about my feelings and stuff like that. So yeah, there is that whole what is reasonable. But then it's like even bringing into the concept. So say you said 30 to 50, and then you had a recruitment agency call you up and say, I know they say 30 to 50, but and you want 60. I think they'll go up to 60. What legislation have you got the company then say, well, I didn't tell them that. I told them it was 30 to 50.
Well, I guess it's what the advert says it's going to have to be what it is, right? But does that mean everyone has to advertise jobs? I'm sure companies don't now. They just give it to a recruitment consultancy. And then there's the onus on them to actually be the people that are broadcasting that salary.
We have a really good thing that says if you do need a really good recruitment agency, Bullfinch Recruitment are your go-to people for anything recruitment related.
There you go. You just sold it. More questions and answers there. Do we have the answer? Maybe next podcast we will.
Or should we get an expert on?
There you go.
Or just people tackling the problem, what they're doing. Let's get some case studies.
Yeah, let's hear. Get in touch.
What about one of our listeners if they have an answer for it? If my mum has an answer though, because she's probably going to be the only one who will listen to it.
And I doubt anyone who's listened to it will have got this far.
So well done if you have gotten this far. And if you do
And
have
hi, Sharon Jimpson.
and yeah, if you've got any ideas as to how you're going to tackle it, let us know. Because right now we don't have the answer to that one. Well, I think that's a wrap on our first podcast.
Where's the board thing? You need to get one of those.
I'll order one.
Yeah, don't expense that. I don't agree.
Make one when I'm in the office. Dig into the supply cupboard.
Yeah, some of those, we've got more keyboards than anything else. You could take a keyboard.
There you go. I'll just grab 2 keyboards together. That'll
Yeah.
do the job. Perfect. Right. Well, I'm going to stop recording and then someone will probably say something that's gold and I won't have it.